I'm going to start with a prayer, as we always should. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitchenu. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with your prayer. Because today is a very important day. What's today on the Jewish calendar? Does anybody know what today is on the Jewish calendar? No. That's interesting. Today is Tammuz 17. What happened on the 17th of Tammuz? A lot. The 17th of Tammuz was the day that Moshe destroyed the tablets. It was the day that, and I'm doing this from memory, it's the day that the Romans actually breached the walls of the temple, the walls of Jerusalem. And it's also, there's actually 5 things that happened on this day. This is a fast day in Judaism, except today is a Shabbat, and you won't fast on Shabbat. So the fast day is postponed until tomorrow. It's not a biblically mandated fast day, but it is a fast day in traditional rabbinic Judaism. So that's just a bit of tidbit. The thing is today's Torah portion is Balak. And Balak is the story of Balaam and Balak, and the interesting thing that came out of this week's Torah portion is something known as the Matovu. You ever heard Matovu? Matovu was a blessing that Balaam gave to the Israelites without their knowing from the top of a mountain, and it became what Jewish people pray before you enter the synagogue each day or each Shabbat. All right, so let's do rabbis of the Middle Ages. I picked rabbis of the Middle Ages because it's something I'm interested in, and one of the good things about being able to teach is you get to do a lot of studying in something that you're interested in, and you get to project that to all of you guys. So, why are rabbis so important to Judaism? The word rabbi originates from the Hebrew meaning teacher. Rabbi is a teacher. The term has evolved over Jewish history to include many roles and meanings. Today, it usually refers to those who have received rabbinical ordination and are educated in matters of halakha. Halakha is Jewish law. They are the ones knowledgeable enough to answer halakhic questions. And most countries have a chief rabbi that has that responsibility to settle halakhic disputes. Rabbis of the Talmudic times were the sole authority on the oral Torah. Now, Talmudic times are before the Mishnah was actually written, before the oral Torah was put into writing. So, that being the case, the only ones that really had the knowledge of the oral Torah were the rabbis. And the way they got that knowledge is it was transferred down from generation to generation. The rabbi was also revered as a figure close to God. He was closer to God than anyone else in the community. He was thought to have the ability to curse and bless individuals, and a rabbi has no actual power under Jewish law. Give me 1 second here. While Catholic priests or other religions, their priests are thought to be intermediaries between God and man. Rabbis are nothing more than regular people who may be officially recognized through a process of ordination or informally by virtue of the respect that they've earned just from their knowledge, righteousness, and the way they live, and this respect they would have earned from their communities. The word rabbi translates as teacher in Hebrew. In the Jewish community, a rabbi is viewed not only as a teacher, a spiritual leader, but a counselor, a role model, and an educator. Education of the young is, in fact, the principal role of a rabbi. passing it down from generation to generation. So educating the young is something that is a principal duty of a rabbi. The rabbi may also be a spiritual leader of services, such as Shabbat services, High Holy Days, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and life cycle events like bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs. And we actually had something here last week or the week before where we had a baby naming ceremony, or a blessing of a baby. Prior to the establishment of rabbinical academies, many people who functioned as Jewish religious authorities and spiritual leaders carried the title of rabbi despite lacking formal ordination. According to Ephraim Harnafogel, a Yeshiva University historian, evidence of formal ordination certificates can be found as early as Spain in the 11th century. Efforts to professionalize and certify rabbinic training later gained traction across Europe, driven mostly by the influence of European Christian universities. What was happening is these Christian universities were ordinating their priests or their leaders, their whichever denomination it would have been, most likely Catholics, but other denominations as well. So it was kind of a modern statecraft. It's the state, the rise of the state, modernity as they call it, changed the whole face of ordination, because one of the things that happened in modernity or in modern times was the rise of the state. You needed a document, a degree, or a license to practice. In Judaism, a rabbi is a teacher of Torah. The basic form of the rabbi developed in Pharisaic and Talmudic era, when learned teachers assembled to codify Judaism's written and oral laws. The first sage from whom the Mishnah uses as the title of rabbi was Yonahan ben Zakkai, active in early to mid-1st century CE. In more recent centuries, the duties of the rabbi became increasingly influenced by the duties of the Protestant Christian minister. Hence, they call them pulpit rabbis. And in 19th century Germany and the United States, rabbinic activities included sermons, pastoral counseling, and represented the community to the outside, and all increased in importance. The rabbi became much more than just a teacher of Torah. He became the head of the institution that he was running, which was basically a synagogue. The Hebrew word master is Rav. It's a resh and a beit. The plural for that is rabbanim, which literally means great one. I can't drive this thing. Brad, can you go to the next slide? So this is from the Tree of Life Bible. And rabbi is a highly esteemed teacher who trained disciples. And the title comes from a Hebrew word meaning my great one. So Yeshua was called a rabbi. So he was a teacher. He was a teacher of Torah. The form of the title in English and many other languages derives from the possessive form in Hebrew, which is called Rav, rabbi, meaning my master, which is the way a student would address a master of Torah. Rabbi is not an occupation found in the Hebrew Bible, and ancient generations did not employ related titles such as Rabban, Rabbi, Rab to describe either the Babylonian sages or the sages in Israel. The titles Rabban and Rabbi are first mentioned in the Mishnah, which was written in 200 CE. The term was first used for Rabbi Gamliel the elder, Rabbi Shimeon, his son, and Rabbi Johanan ben Zakkai, who I mentioned a little bit earlier, all of whom were patriarchs and presidents of the Sanhedrin. The title rabbi occurs in the books of Matthew, Mark, and John in the New Testament, where it is used in reference to the scribes and Pharisees as well as Yeshua. So, let's do a little historical overview of the rabbi and how he would have functioned in history. The governments or the kingdoms of Israel and Judah were based on a system that included the Jewish kings, the Jewish prophets, and the legal authority of the high court of Jerusalem, the great Sanhedrin, and the ritual authority of the priesthood. Members of the Sanhedrin had to receive their ordination, which is called simcha, in an uninterrupted line of transmission from Moses. Yet rather than being referred to as rabbis, they were called priests or scribes, like Ezra, who was called in the Bible Ezra the priest, or the scribe, a scribe of the words of God's commandments and his statutes unto Israel. Rabbi, as a religious title, does not appear in the Hebrew Bible. All of the above personalities would have been expected to be steeped in the wisdom of Torah and the commandments, which would have made them rabbis in the modern sense of the word. This is illustrated by a 2,000-year-old teaching in the Mishnah in a part called Ethics of the Fathers. Ethics of the Fathers is called Pirkei Avot, which was observed by King David. This is something that a story about King David in Pirkei Avot. One who learns from their companion a single chapter, a single halakha, a single verse, a single Torah statement, or even a single letter, must treat them with honor. For so we find with King David of Israel, who learned nothing from Ahithophel except two things. Yet he called him his teacher, his rabbi, his guide, his intimate, as it is said, "You are a man of my measure, my guide, my intimate." This was in Psalms 55:14. One can derive from this the following. If David, king of Israel, who learned nothing from Ahithophel, if I pronounce that correctly, except for two things, called him his teacher, his guide, his intimate, one who learns from their companion a single chapter, a single halakha, a single verse, a single statement, or even a single letter, how much more must they treat them with honor? And honor is due only for Torah, as it says, "The wise shall inherit honor," in Proverbs 3:35, "and the perfect shall inherit good," in Proverbs 28:10. And only Torah is truly good, as it is said, "I have given you a good teaching. Do not forsake my Torah," in Proverbs 4:2. That's all in Ethics of the Father, or Pirkei Avot 6:3. With the destruction of the two temples in Jerusalem, the end of the Jewish monarchy, and the decline of the dual institutions of prophets and the priesthood, the focus of scholarly and spiritual leadership within the Jewish people shifted to the sages, the men of the great assembly. The assembly was composed of the earliest group of rabbis, in the more modern sense of the word, in large part because they began the formulation and encoded and codified the Mishnah and the Talmud and subsequent rabbinical scholarship, leading to what is known as Rabbinic Judaism. Brad, can you go through a couple of slides? All right, yes, that right there is a book called Herald of Destiny. It's from Art Scroll. If you want to learn about, if you're really interested in the medieval rabbis, this is a history of Judaism in the Middle Ages. It's actually part of a set. There's 3 books, and this is the middle book. There's one that's the beginning of Jewish history, the middle of Jewish history, and then the last book goes to the current age. Keep going, Brad. Now there's just some medieval rabbis as they would be discussing something about Torah as they were learning together. Keep going. Of course, this would be a little bit more modern rabbi that was actually giving a teaching. So keep going. And this is interesting. You can't hardly see, but right beside the rabbi in the middle there that everybody's gathered around are children. There's 3 children that are right there at the rabbi's left and his right that are learning Torah from their rabbi. And keep going. So, we come to this concept called Parodies. And in order to understand teachings from Scripture, we have to get this this concept. You have to understand this concept. Parodies is just taking these four words, Peshat, Remez, Darash, and some pronounce it Sud, some pronounce it Sod. If you look at the Hebrew spelling there, it's Sod, based on the way that I've learned Hebrew. But these are the four levels of interpretation of Scripture. Peshat, Remez, Darash, and Sod. The first letter of each, P-R-D-S, is taken and the vowels added for pronunciation, giving the word parodies, meaning the Hebrew word of this parodies is garden or orchard. Each layer is deeper and more intense than the last, like the layers of an onion. Peshat is just meaning simple. One of the rabbis that did the best, that when he gives his interpretation of the Torah, that gives you a Peshat interpretation, is Rashi. Rashi's interpretations are Peshat. Remez, pronounced, Remez, means hint. Darash means concept, and Sod or Sud means hidden. So these, and they kind of build on one another. Peshat being the entry level, and then each one's a little bit deeper as you go. So this is the rabbis, as we study Torah commentary with the rabbis, we would see these styles used in the way that they taught Torah, and you would recognize it by you really need to dig into what these things mean to recognize them as you're going through and studying Torah. So, they actually had rabbinical eras that they would that were classified as time periods that they've broken the rabbis out into. Brad, if you'll go to the next slide. So these are the, can y'all see that? So these are the rabbinical eras of the sages and spiritual leadership. You had, it goes just back to the year minus 200 or 200 BCE, and it goes up until the year 2000. And what we're going to be looking at is the one in blue there, which that would be the Middle Ages. And the Middle Ages would have been termed Rishonim, which would have been from the year 1050 up to the year 1563. Some of the rabbis that were part of the Rishonim were Rashi and Rambam. And have y'all heard these names? Y'all heard these names? I mean, most of the ones that study Torah I know have, but if you get into studying Torah without utilizing the rabbis to help you understand, you're missing. You miss some of the lifelong work that these people put in to make this happen, and you're just not. It's an incomplete picture, basically. So, Brad, if you'll go to the next slide. The first rabbi we're going to look at is Rashi. So, Rashi, his name was Shlomo Yitzhaki. He's generally known by the acronym of Rashi. He was a medieval French rabbi and the author of a comprehensive commentary on the Talmud and the commentary on the Tanakh. He was born in 1040 and he died in 1105 in Troyes, France. He had all daughters. He didn't have any sons, but he had grandsons. His grandsons were Rabbanu Tam, Rashbam, which is not to be confused with Rashbam, Revam, and he had three daughters, Yocheved, Miriam, and Rachel. So, when you read in the history of the Herald of Destiny, they give you this glowing description of Rabbi Rashi. The divine hand of providence, always guiding the Jewish people through its long and difficult exile, was never as much evidence as it was in the 11th and 12th centuries. In both Sephardic Spain and Ashkenazic France, there arose gigantic figures whose influence and works remain the guarantors and the mainstay of Jewish survival for all succeeding generations. The power of the individual in history is never to be underestimated, and in the Middle Ages, it was indeed a few mere individuals who saved the Jewish world from spiritual atrophy and disarray. The major figure in Ashkenazic Jewry, in fact, the father of Ashkenazic Jewry in a spiritual sense, and the teacher of all Israel in a literal sense, was Rabbi Shalom Yisaki, the son of Yitzhak, is known as Rashi. Born in 1040 in the city of Troyes, Rashi was a descendant of a well-known family that traced its lineage to the house of David. He has no equal in world history in providing education to the masses, inspiration to the scholarly, and guidance to the young. Rashi, through his commentaries to the Bible and Talmud, became the par excellence of all Israel for all time. He also became one of the strongest moral forces and role models in all Jewish history. What's interesting is now when they keep going and talking about him, they talk about him like he's still here, like he's still alive, like they're because here's the thing: if you ever go and study Torah and use Rashi's commentary, you're studying at his feet. He's giving it to you line by line. He's expounding on each line, and it's you're through his writings. He's living. As perhaps no one else in Jewish scholarship, Rashi's personality shines forth from his scholarly works. Rashi is modest and unassuming, of simple faith and uncomplicated vision. He is soft and gentle, compassionate and respectful, concise and inquisitive of life. He has no philosophic problems, never feels under attack or pressure, is never apologetic, and is always intellectually honest. He is never too embarrassed to say, "I do not know," nor too restricted to propose an interpretation that my heart tells me, nor too timid to disagree even with his mentors when he is convinced of the rectitude of his position. Although basically he is non-argumentative and not interred in asserting personal positions, his goal is to hold the student's hand and to guide him and her through the intricacies of the text, acting as a mother who helps her child cross a busy intersection. Isn't that what a great teacher does? A great teacher wants you to get it. They don't want you to be fed it. They want you to get it, because if you don't get it, it's worthless. If it doesn't become a part of you, it's worthless. He is tolerant of humanity and all its foibles and errors. He is confident of divine justice and salvation. He loves the Jewish people, even the backsliders and the former apostates, the land of Israel, and above all, the Torah of Israel. His love for Torah shines forth from every word of his writings. His wording is simple, direct, and brief. Like I said, he's Bashat, while at the same time containing unfathomable depth and interest. He is our first great teacher, speeding honey on the page and making Torah sweet. He is our postgraduate mentor. After laborious years of Talmudic study, we begin to see the genius of his phrase and unerring choice of words and examples. He is a seamless person, agadic and halakhic, rational and mystical, poetic and simple. He demeans no one and uplifts everyone. He is unmatched in Jewish history. Notice how he's all present day. It's like he's still with us. Rashi would have made his living, they're not sure on this, but as a wine merchant. He would have been a wine merchant. Most of the rabbis in those days, they didn't make a living being a rabbi. They made a living doing something else, and this was their side job, basically. So they were extremely committed to their side job to be having all these things for even today. But Rashi did establish a yeshiva. So my thought is Rashi probably was supported by his yeshiva because of how large that yeshiva became. When Rashi established his yeshiva in Troyes, due to his greatness and popularity, soon it eclipsed all the other yeshivas in France. He became, in essence, the master and teacher of French Jewry. By the end of the 11th century, Rashi's commentary to the Talmud had spread throughout the Jewish world, an occurrence as miraculous as commentary itself. And from that time onward, Talmudic study was automatically based upon Rashi's commentary, even today. If Rashi's commentary of the Talmud was the tower of scholarship for the ages, his commentary for the Bible, especially the Torah, was the great gift to Israel that made Rashi the teacher of every Jew. And not just Jew. It's Messianic Jews as well, those of us that study Torah and incorporate the rabbi's comments into our studies each week. Humash, with Rashi, became the basic text of every Jewish child and adult throughout the world. His work was and remains the classic explanation of Jewish thought as reflected in the words of the Bible. The heroes of the Bible live forever through the words of Rashi. In short, beginning with the 11th century, the Hebrew Bible and Rashi's commentary became inseparable. Rashi did not only create books, he also created people. He did what he was supposed to. He did what the Torah asked him to do. He passed it down from generation to generation. Not only did he do it, but he did it in a time when most of us would never have been able to do that. Because he lived in a time when his society was being dominated by two powerful forces. One of them was Muslim, and one of them was Christian. And both of them wanted to eliminate him and his people. The Muslims would take over Spain, and of course he wasn't in Spain, but and that part of Europe, and the Christians would fight back, and it would go back and forth, the power struggle between the two. And both of them had the Jewish people as secondary citizens and would use them to their advantage, and when they didn't need them, they would extinguish them. Rashi accomplished his main achievements before the dramatic event that it changed the life of Ashkenazi Jewry, which was the Crusades. His society in France was directly affected by the Crusades. The Crusades just wiped out the Jewish people in France. Rashi's major works. Rashi's best known works are his comprehensive commentaries on the Bible, the Babylonian Talmud. All the editions of the Talmud published since the 1520s have included Rashi's commentary in the margins. His commentary on the Bible have become a foundational element of Jewish education to this day. They are often taught side by side with the Torah when students begin learning in yeshivas and Jewish day schools. His curriculum is used today in yeshivas, teachers. You know, whenever you're studying this stuff, you start going down these rabbit trails, right? So I go down the rabbit trail of the yeshivas, trying to find, it's amazing. We could do a teaching on yeshivas for an hour or two, let me tell you. There's a lot of stuff about the history of yeshivas and how they work, and because I wanted to learn a little bit more about that. Rashi's commentaries on the Bible are based on the Masoret text. That was a group of people that would take the Hebrew of the Bible and figure out what these words meant and how often they were used and all that sort of thing. A version of the Bible compiled by scholars between the 7th and 10th centuries in which they clarified pronunciation by establishing a vowel notation system. In preparing the Masoretic text, the scholars also tallied the number of times particular words appeared, presumably in an effort to determine those words' significance. In addition to his commentaries, Rashi also produced responsae on a range of Jewish legal questions, as well as writing devotional poetry. Rashi's signature style. Rashi's commentaries combine an explanatory style that elucidates the simple meaning of the text, known as Pashat, and an interpretive style that elaborates further, known as Darash. He will get deeper. He collects, distills, and weaves in classic rabbinic interpretations while adding his own perspectives. There is some debate about Rashi's accessibility as a general leader. There is some debate as to Rashi's accessibility to the general reader. Because his language is clear and concise, his work is often characterized as intended for the masses. However, his conciseness assumes that the reader has some foundational knowledge and that therefore he does not have to explain everything in detail. Most of the rabbis would be that way. When you're reading this stuff and there's certain things you have to go back and refer to if you're like me and didn't come from that culture. So there are some things that when you're reading it, it just takes a little longer if you don't know the culture to go back and understand what they're trying to say. So that was Rashi. Now, was Rashi a believer in Messiah? Yes. Rashi believes there's a Messiah. He believes that there is a Messiah. Messiah is a Jewish, we call it concept, and when I say Jewish concept, because that's what's been told to me so much, it means something different to me than somebody else. Somebody hears that word concept and they don't think that it's like something you think about, not real. But it's a Jewish reality. Messiah is a Jewish reality. He just did not understand that Yeshua was the Messiah. But he believes in Messiah. He is a wholehearted believer in there being a Messiah. So let's go to the next one, Brad. So the next medieval rabbi that I wanted to talk about today was Maimonides, which is Rambam. Now, as Rashi was to Ashkenazic, Rambam was to Sephardic. Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, I don't want to butcher this, commonly known as Maimonides, is also referred by the acronym Rambam. He was a medieval Sephardic Jewish philosopher who became one of the most prolific and influential Torah scholars of the Middle Ages. He was born in 1135 in Cordoba, Spain. He died in 1204. Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon was one of the towering figures in the history of the Jewish people. Of him it was said, from Moshe to Moshe, from Moses to the son of Maimon, there arose none like Moshe. Among the Jewish people, he is known as Rambam. While universally for his fame, influence reached far beyond the confines of his own people, he is called Maimonides, the Greek form of the son of Maimon. This brief biography brings to light many little-known facts about Maimonides, 12th century philosopher, and he made his living as a physician. He was a doctor. Rambam was born on the 14th day of Nisan. Do y'all know what day y'all were born on in the Hebrew calendar? You can do this. You can go to the, there's a way to research this online really quick to find out what day you were born. The 14th of Nisan, would that have any meaning? Yeah. He was a descendant and a distinguished and scholarly family tracing all the way back to Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the compiler of the Mishnah, and even further back to the royal house of King David. So both him and Rashi came from the line of King David. At the conclusion of his commentary on the Mishnah, the compilation of the oral tradition of the Torah, Tractate Yuk Tazim, Rambam enumerates his ancestry 8 generations back, indicating that all were distinguished Dayanim, rabbis and scholars. His father served as Dayan, a judge in the Jewish court of the Jewish community of Cordova, and was famous not only for his vast Torah knowledge, but also for his general scholarship, especially mathematics, and astronomy. Rabbi Maimon himself taught his prodigious son Scripture, Talmud, and every aspect of Jewish religion and tradition, and provided him also with a multifaceted education and a thorough training in worldly sciences. It was at the suggestion of his father that the young Moshe immersed himself in the study of philosophy and medicine, fields in which he was to later attain world renown. He studied at the feet of his father. His father taught him everything. Taught him Torah. He taught him about medicine. He taught him math. He taught him how to be, it was basically, he was homeschooled. He was homeschooled. The young Moshe was barely bar mitzvah when the fanatical Almohades conquered Cordova in 1148. These ruthless, savage Muslims tolerated no other religion other than their own and offered the Jewish population the choice of conversion to Islam, death, or expulsion from their native land. Thus, the Jews were given the excruciating alternative of either surrendering their eternal faith or their very life, or abandoning their homeland where they'd lived for many centuries, leaving behind all their possessions to seek a haven of refuge in a hostile world where they were nowhere welcome. The vast majority of Jews, among them the Dayan and his family, chose exile and left Cordova. Of those who could not leave, many met a martyr's death, sanctifying the name of God, and some became insincere converts to Islam, mere outwardly, all the while, secretly in their hearts and in the privacy of their homes, observing and practicing all the precepts of the Torah and never abandoning their inherited religion. Rabbi Maimon and his family wandered about from city to city in southern Spain without being able to stay in any one place for a long period. For the conquering Almohadim hordes swept across southern Spain. After 10 years of a nomadic life, they joined a group of fugitives headed to North Africa and eventually settled in 1159 in Fez, which was the capital of Morocco. But they were still not destined to enjoy peace and security. After a 5-year stay in Fez, they had to leave because of religious intolerance and persecution. They again became wandering Jews without a home. By way of Jerusalem and Hebron, bear with me, the Maimon family made their way to Egypt. The Holy Land, desolate and unpopulated, ravaged by the Crusaders, did not afford them a permanent place of residence. They spent 3 days in Jerusalem in prayer at the Western Wall, and 1 day in Hebron praying at the graves of the patriarchs at the cave of Machpelah. From there they proceeded to Egypt. In Fastad near Cairo, the seat of the caliphate, the family of Rabbi Maimon at last found a haven. Unlike other Muslim countries, the Jews in Egypt, under the tolerant and enlightening rule of the Fatimid Caliphate, were granted complete religious and civil freedom. They were allowed to develop their religious, cultural, and communal life, as well as to engage in commerce without any restrictions or interference. It was here that Rabbi Moshe was to create the master works for which the Jewish people are forever indebted to him. In Egypt, they had barely settled in their docile and were beginning to enjoy this long-sought life of freedom and peace when misfortune struck the family. A few months after their arrival, Rabbi Maimon, the former Dayan of Cordova, passed away. Rabbi Moshe deeply mourned the loss of his great father, who was to him not only a father, but his foremost teacher and most important influence. Rabbi Maimon wrote a commentary on the Talmud, which his son, Rabbi Moshe, Rambam, mentions in his introduction to the Mishnah, in which he used as a source in the preparation of his own work. His younger brother David took upon himself the responsibility of providing financial support for the entire family in order to enable his gifted brother, Moshe Rambam, to devote himself to his studies without financial worry. David became a jewel merchant, importing gems and precious stones from India. He succeeded in this business, and his family lived very comfortably. Unfortunately, the family was struck again by tragedy, by the untimely death of David. When David died, now Rambam had to support the family. So he had to take a break from his Torah studies, and he became a physician. It devolved upon Rabbi Moshe to become the breadwinner of the family. However, as a result of his incessant study and grief over his brother's death, he became seriously ill. Bedridden for several months, he was unable to provide support for his family. When he finally recovered, he began to practice medicine. Rambam did not deem it proper to obtain monetary benefits or receive financial remuneration from his vast Torah knowledge. He took no pay for teaching Torah. Torah should be studied and taught, he maintained, only for the sake of heaven and not for earning a livelihood. Hence, he devoted himself to the vocation of medicine. He was so successful in this profession and in the course of time gained such a reputation that he eventually was appointed to the Sultan of Soldans as his personal physician. So, I bet you that some of this stuff you probably didn't know. These are some quotes from Rambam. We each decide whether to make ourselves learned or ignorant, compassionate or cruel, generous or miserly. No one forces us. No one decides for us. No one drags us along one path or another. We are responsible for what we are. Truth does not become more true by virtue of the fact that the entire world agrees with it, nor less so if the whole world disagrees with it. I bet you've heard this one. Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. That was a quote from Maimonides, Rambam. Every man should view himself as equally balanced, half good and half evil. Likewise, he should see the entire world as half good and half evil. With a single good deed, he will tip the scales for himself and for the entire world to see the good. Teach thy tongue to say, I do not know, and thou shalt progress. This was really good here. This is back in 1100, right? Let nothing which can be treated by diet be treated by any other means. There are 8 rungs in charity. The highest is when you help a man to help himself. To this day, Maimonides and the French Jewish sage Rashi are the most widely studied Jewish scholars. Contemporary yeshiva students generally focus on the Mishnah Torah. Maimonides wrote this Mishnah Torah. Mishnah Torah is like another Mishnah. It's basically a commentary on the entire Torah and the entire the entire Mishnah and the Talmud, for that matter. Bear with me. And his Book of Commandments. And he had a compilation of the Torah 613 commandments. He basically takes all the 613 commandments, lists them out, and then gives you commentary on each one of them and what their purpose is and why they're important. Maimonides also formulated a credo of Jewish expression called the 13 Articles of Faith, a popular reworking of which appears in most Jewish prayer books. Among other things, this credo affirms belief in the oneness of God, the divine origins of the Torah, and the afterlife. Its 12th statement of faith, I believe with a full heart in the coming of Messiah, and even though he may tarry, I will still wait for him, was often among the last said by Jews as they marched into the Nazi gas chambers. So Brad, go to the next one. We have a little bit of time. The last rabbi I'll talk about this morning in medieval times is Rambam. Moshe ben Nachman, known as Moses, son of Naaman, Nachmanides. He's also referred to as Rambam. He was a leading medieval Jewish scholar, Sephardic rabbi, philosopher, physician. He was also a doctor, Kabbalist, and biblical commentator. He was raised, studied, and lived for most of his life in Girona, Catalonia. He also considered to be an important figure in the reestablishment of the Jewish community in Jerusalem following its destruction by the Crusaders in 1099. Maimonides was the foremost Holocaust of his age. Like Maimonides before him, Maimonides was a Spaniard, he was Sephardic, who was both a physician and a great Torah scholar. However, unlike the rationalist Maimonides, Maimonides had a strong mystical bent. Now here's one that would give you the sod, or the sud. Okay, he would give you a more mystical interpretation of the Torah. He was known for his aggressive refutations of Christianity. Most notably, he had a debate with Pablo Christianity, a converted Jew, before King James of Spain in 1263. And if you read about that, he won that debate hands down. It was it's interesting if you read about that. Maimonides could be described as one of history's first Zionists because he declared that it is a mitzvah to take possession of Israel and to live in it. He said, so long as Israel occupies the Holy Land, the earth is regarded as subject to him. Maimonides fulfilled this commandment, moving to the Holy Land during the Crusades after he was expelled from Spain for his polemics. He found devastation in the Holy Land, but even in this destruction, he said, it is a blessed land. He died there in 1270 CE. In his commentary, one of the standard biblical commentaries which took its place beside that of Rashi and Rambam, he tries to arrive at the meaning of the plain text. Even though he's doing it mystical, he tries to give you understanding. At the same time, he believes the Torah has a deeper meaning, and he does take you into the mystical. So, some of the other rabbis of that time were Rabbi Aben Ezra, Rabbi Gershon, Rabbi Hillel, Rabbi Rashbam, which was Rashi's son, and then they had the Tosafists, maybe, which were done in the 11th, 12th, and 13th century. So why is it important for me to, in a Messianic synagogue, talk about Jewish rabbis and give you all this history about Jewish rabbis? If any of you ever take Torah, you're going to hear these names. And it sure would be nice to know where they are, who they were, and why they're important, right? So, I believe, whether you're Messianic or Jewish, without these rabbis, we would not have as good an understanding of Torah. Bottom line. These rabbis spent their entire lives studying, debating, giving Jewish cultural insight, and dominating their thoughts, documenting their thoughts, and giving us so that all of us that are alive today have a better understanding of Torah. These men kept the Torah alive by teaching their peers and students the ways of God and passing it down from generation to generation, just as God instructed his people to do. They did it in a time when they were trying to be destroyed by all those that were around them. They kept the Torah alive. If they hadn't done that, we would not have it today. It's just that simple. Until you've walked in the shoes of another, you cannot appreciate their experience. These men and the entire Jewish people were being squeezed between two powerful forces, Christianity and Islam, and they still are today. There was and is an effort by both these powerful forces to completely destroy the Jewish people and their way of life. If you take a Torah class today, you're going to study Balak. And the Torah portion, Balak, is a central figure, Balaam. Balaam is a representation of the destroyer of Israel. He wants to destroy Israel completely and totally. He wants to destroy the people of God. But God wouldn't let him do it. God protects his people. His people have been through all that they've been through, and they're still there. All these people have come and gone. All these societies have come and gone, but they're still there. That is God. That is God's will. That's why that's happening. To disrespect them, or the work is not, to me, is not an option. I truly appreciate all the prophets, the sages, and the rabbis that have come before and that will come after me, and know that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is blessing their work. So let's close with a prayer. Avinu Shabbat Shemayim, our Father in heaven. Father, thank you for this glorious Shabbat day that you've given us today. Thank you for allowing me to come before your people and to speak your word. Bless your word, Father. Bless this house of worship, Beth Adonai, house of the Lord, so that we may further your kingdom, so that we may, in all that we do here, please you, Father, and do your will, so that we may be able to pass on from generation to generation your words, your Torah, your teachings, and do your will in our lives. I pray this in Yeshua's name. Amen.